Hi, thank you for tuning in for some political opinion. That says a lot about who you are. America is facing some terrible problems right now. And I have a bold, ruthless, effective, and easy solution, and I'm going to tell you what it is right now. We need to end the Democratic Party. The fact that this is a two-party system is a myth. We are being defeated by our own objectivity by giving Democrats equal consideration at every election. They think it's theirs by rote. They do not deserve to be on the ballot. And by the end of this video, I think you will agree. Ending the Democratic Party is only half the problem. We also need to realign our moral compass, our national spirit, or spirituality. We've been told that religion is the problem in America and that religion has no place in politics. That is totally bogus. Many Americans seem unclear as to the differences between competing forms of government like socialism and progressivism. America is run by we the people, with rights granted by God, so no one can steal them away because they come from a supreme being, one nation, under God, endowed by our Creator with undeniable truths, self-evident, and according to natural laws. America, via Christianity, guarantees equal opportunity, freedom to live without being ruled over, without being enslaved, dictated to, or impeded in any way. It's about the supreme power of God over nations, over individual men. Our capitalist system of free enterprise is a place where you get to keep the money you earn. Socialist and progressive forms of government are atheistic. God's truth is replaced with a cult of natural human goodness, where self-righteousness means right and wrong are replaced with winners and losers, and might makes right. This nonsense has been played out time and time again throughout history, and places like Hitler's Germany and Marxist dictatorships like the Soviet Union have led to some of the worst catastrophes in the world. In socialist countries, you give your money to the government. Rights are granted, rights are denied. Competition in businesses are replaced with the spirit of cooperation, meaning state mandates and control. All attempts at socialism have failed. Look at Greece, Venezuela, and even the great liberal Mecca, the Scandinavian peninsula, is projected to go bankrupt soon. Socialism is slavery. Everyone is equal in misery. Capitalism is freedom. Everyone is equal in opportunity. Progressive, socialism, fascism, communism, they all mean the same thing, revolution. They all are parasites of successful democracies. They find unhappy people and they convince them that they are victims of capitalism. Progressivism is inherently anti-American. They don't believe in representative government. They believe in unelected governing elites called expert commissions, which make all decisions based on administrative schooling. Progressives are the ones that started ballot initiatives to change state constitutions. That's what destroyed California. Thanks to progressives, special interest groups are now spending enormous amounts of money on direct democracy ballot initiatives. Progressives believe that progressives believe that government must control all details of all commerce and production, which is completely contrary to our system of free enterprise. Progressives believe that the fact that rights come from God is a myth. There is no God. Like social justice warriors, rights are something you go out and take, demand, or lose. With no God, rights then come from the government, a gift of the liberal state. Progressives in all socialist forms of government believe in the sacrifice of individuals for the greater good. So say goodbye to privacy and private property rights. You basically work for the state. If the state gives you your rights, they own you. You become their slave. Progressives are horrible at foreign policy. Because they see no American exceptionalism. On the contrary, America is just a country without proper leadership. Progressives are taught to disregard our declaration and our Constitution as irrelevant. America is just a fixer-upper, a nation of God. It is a nation lost. lost backwards people to them. They want to move us to the modern world, to science. Their religion is the devotion to conservation and the cultural arts. In a country where God has given complete freedom and civil rights, guaranteed by law, you need to have a pretty good hairy lie to find any social injustice. Social justice is just an excuse or false justification for lies, destruction, violence, and robbery. But outbreaks of social justice warriors such as Black Lives Matter are important. They're a reminder of who we are really dealing with in socialist, progressive, liberal Democrats in the socialist, progressive, liberal Democrat movement. Truth doesn't matter to them, and they won't take no for an answer. This is not too far from ISIS terrorists. The social injustice lie and liberal intolerance for any opposing opinions is so prevalent on college campuses that students there live in abject fear of challenging anyone. Cults are defined as being exclusive, secretive, and authoritarian. It's just interesting that all socialists, progressives, and ISIS terrorists fall into that same definition. This is a far cry from the love of a Christian God. Governments are the enemy of all people in the world. America is one place that protects you, the individual, from government, a place that many people in the world consider the ultimate utopia because of our cherished rights of the individual. Currently in the Middle East, people recognize the wisdom of having a secular form of government, meaning a government that strives to separate itself from any religious and spiritual matters, for fear of evil extremist cults that would force their morality and their beliefs on people. In this country, it's the opposite. It is the Christian faith, God's love, that keeps us free to do whatever we want. Secularism is our death knell, the silver bullet that marks the end of American freedom. Our founders made it clear, our rights come from a non-demanding God. Their grand idea was for Americans to keep an eye on God or godliness, virtue, integrity, character, honor if you prefer, and switch out our elected leaders as needed, if they stray from those core principles, if they display a lack of character. The Christian majority in this country is irrelevant. This is a Christian country. This is a Christian country because our founders embraced the Christian philosophy and put God in charge. Our rights do not come from the Constitution. The Constitution was written to protect our God-given rights, not award them. There is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. Our founders wanted no religious endorsement on the federal level only to guard against a theocracy, which is a country ruled by a specific church. They did this to ensure religious freedom. They wanted all religions pursued at the state level. They knew the only way to hang on to our country was through self-discipline. For hundreds of years, the only school books were the Holy Bible or Bible-based. The founders knew that religion was critical to help better people and develop leaders of character. You can't have leaders of honor, character, and character without a strong moral compass. Now, before I go on, let me just ask, would you describe Americans as moral? Our nation has been exposed to an anti-religious con job, so let me take a moment to defend Christianity by touching on our secular Supreme Court, the Christian Crusades, and slavery. Attacking Christianity is unfair, unwarranted, and incredibly foolish. In 1857, just prior to our Civil War, a freed slave named Dred Scott sued for equal rights with whites. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and their decision was basically black people are not human, and they denied his rights. Well, there's no moral integrity there. The Democratic Party leaders have developed judicial supremacy, where decisions are made by appointed judges without any system of checks and balances. So basically, our Constitution comes down to 9 people on the Supreme Court, unelected and appointed for life, with no fear of losing their jobs. To usurp or ignore God and all our formal documents created by our founders in the United States of America is clearly poor judgment. All men are created equal, as stated in our Declaration, stated in Galatians 3:28, 1 Corinthians 12:13, and in fact is the very essence of the Holy Bible. Our system of checks and balances was taken from the Holy Bible in Isaiah 33:22, and all members of the Supreme Court are required to answer their oath of office with, "So help me God." But there are godless people who desperately want to dismantle our religious heritage, have always wanted our Constitution free to be altered according to the will of our nation's elites or the whim of culturally dictated norms. Conservative Republicans know that this is completely wrong and unconstitutional. Had the Supreme Court got it right in the Dred Scott case, with a proper respect for God and country, instead of serving the interests of landowners and cultural racists, it's possible that we may not have had the Civil War of 1860, where more than 600,000 people died. Incredibly, President Lincoln ignored the godless ruling in the Dred Scott case and used his executive power to sign into law the Emancipation Proclamation Act, which led the way for equal rights for all. Lincoln considered that the crowning achievement of his presidency. Lincoln, as well as Martin Luther King Jr., were dedicated to making clear that our Constitution must be read from the principles our founders outlined in our Declaration of Independence, and were always concerned about the, quote, moral character of the Union. Today, anyone who acknowledges the Declaration of Independence is labeled a declarationist, as if it was a matter of great controversy. Right now, there are at least 5 people in the Supreme Court that consider it their job to install the faith of secular humanism / progressivism, meaning there is no God. So our being endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights is seen as non-applicable. And I'd like to speak about urban plight, the financial crisis of 2008, global warming, the war in Iraq, current campaign issues, abortion, sex, and also about God. God has been reported missing in the United States. Oh, I can't talk about religion? Watch me. First, we must take a look back again at some history and get a few things straight as far as the Crusades and slavery. Let's go back 2,000 years for a moment. 2,000 years ago, Muslims launched an Islamic caliphate, which is a campaign to rule the world, just like ISIS and radical Islamist terrorists right now. Back then, they were taking village after village, forcing people by sword to convert to their faith, and eventually they took the city of Jerusalem. While they were there, they decided to knock over the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a marker of where Christ was crucified and buried. That's what they do. They want to destroy all other religions. The Pope, the head of the Christian Church, called a halt to the atrocities, and the Christian Crusades started, where thousands of men from all walks of life went to Jerusalem and stopped them. Accounts are sketchy, but it is thought that every man that fought died and left his blood on the battlefield. Had they not stopped them, it's possible the entire world would be Muslim right now. It's important to know that radical Islam is not just a religion, but it is also a form of government. You also need to know that radical Islam teaches that it's okay to lie to infidels. Infidels are non-believers. So that's why in all recorded historical events, they lie. In every battle, they say, quote, only innocent civilians were killed. It was a massacre. We were, quote, just victims. When it comes to jihad, which is basically holy war, what country in the world do you think has the most Christians and the most infidels? Amongst these terrorist cutthroat groups / cults, we are known as the Great Satan. The Holy Bible is the only source of true love on earth. The Holy Bible is the only source of true love on earth. And yet the Bible is unwelcome in approximately 52 countries around the world. Throughout the Middle East, Christians are being wiped out by cults of evil extremists. Evil extremist cult leaders block their followers from other faiths and views and convince their followers to murder anyone who doesn't share their radical beliefs. Christianity is the giving of oneself to God and about service to others, including non-believers. The Bible recognizes slavery as a sometimes mutual relationship. This is how it was in ancient times. If people could not feed their families, they offered their services. The Bible never condones race-based slavery that occurred in the United States. The Bible in Exodus 21:16 and 1 Timothy 1:8-10 strictly condemns, quote, man stealing and slave trading. The recommended punishment, is death. In Deuteronomy 15:12 through 15, the Bible suggests that slaves be set free after 6 years. And in Ephesians 6:5 through 9, the Bible encourages Christ-like behavior in both slave and master. Christians used to buy slaves at the market to set them free. But in the democratic South and the cotton fields and tobacco farms, just like the shipbuilders of the first settlers in Boston, they needed the manpower of slaves. It was Christian values that elected godly men to Congress that overrode Democratic Party filibusters and Democrat Party vetoes, and elected a godly Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, that eventually freed the slaves. The Republican platform of that day identified slavery as, quote, a national evil. After the Civil War, the KKK was widespread and dominant throughout the South. The KKK was denounced by every religious denomination. Their goal was to terrorize freed slaves and the nigger-loving Republicans that sympathize with them, end quote. They were Democrats, unhappy about freed slaves as well as government intervention into their localities. The KKK enacted Jim Crow laws, which were white supremacy policies enforced by wrong-headed Democrat Klansmen violating civil rights and pretending to hide behind the Holy Bible. This went on until the late 50s. Ever since then, blacks have been voting Democrat to the tune of up to 95%. Voting 95% is unheard of in any other political group. Why are they voting Democrat? Well, the theory is that the two parties switched. All those horrible Democrats became wonderful Republicans, and all those wonderful Republicans became Democrats. The problem is they didn't switch. That's a horrible lie. The fact is that members of the KKK went from open racism to covert subversive policies that continue to enslave poor people in cities, people that to them are stupid and easily led. They, the Democratic Party leaders, have created urban plight by fostering dependency on government in those communities, which in turn has robbed blacks and the urban poor of the American dream, exactly as the Republican platform of 1936 warned would happen. The Democratic Party leaders have sucked God and America out of those communities. They are under party rule. This is one nation under God. What does God think? Do Black lives matter? Well, the honest answer is no, not at all. Not to Democratic Party leaders. To God and to all Americans, most certainly. So how do we fix urban plight? How do we fix what the Democratic Party leaders have done in urban areas? Well, here's an idea. Let's have government match wages, double them, triple them, from $8 to $24 an hour. The problem is that blacks and the urban poor voted for this in an uninformed, hateful way. Not as individuals, but as a group. That's people being told how to vote. That's un-American. That's harmful to our country. That's the Democratic leaders manufacturing, harnessing, and unleashing hate. The lie is that people excel because of white privilege. The reality is that people are being held back because they're being injected with hate by the Democratic Party leaders, as is currently being done in the rest of America. The Democratic Party leaders are leading blacks like sheep to the slaughter, and now they want to go widespread and national because it wins elections. So before I go on, let me ask you another question. Do you see any hate in America towards religious Republican conservatives? The Democratic Party leaders have accomplices in the anti-American networks like CNN. There is a syndrome, call it CNN syndrome, where people live in the United States, but in order to be politically correct, they view this country from the progressive position of neutrality. The United States is just another country. If we remove God, our country will just blend in with the rest. Those of us that see great beauty in a country run by God are branded as ignorant, bigoted, xenophobic, jingoistic, or as right-wingers. There is no right wing. A right-winger, or someone on the religious right, those are terms used by CNN and the rest of America's toilet paper media and our nation's progressive liberal elites. What it means is an American. It's just a dubious, feckless, nasty little attempt to paint devoted Americans as cultish political extremists that want to impose their religion on others and take over and rule the country, if not the world. What a load of crap. They actually want normal Americans to be viewed as a domestic threat. The political spectrum works like this. Stand next to a wall. Press your right side against the wall. The wall is America. You stand for America. You love your country. You are a patriot and recognize and respect the importance of God in our religious heritage. All that oppose are on the left. So where's the center? The center of the room is well on the left. Where are the moderates? People that oppose the United States used to be called traitors, most certainly radicals by any definition. But because godless liberals label all of the people against the wall as, quote, far-right extremists, they make you think that the center of the room is the place to be. As you move left across the room, you pass socialism, then communism, which is socialism at the point of a gun, and then you get to the extreme left, which is Nazism, where progressives and Nazi party leaders have the same regard for religion and religious people as the Democratic Party's leaders have for blacks, meaning religious people are stupid, easily led, mentally diseased, second-class citizens. I know there are college professors all over the country that want to tell you that Nazism is on the right. They desperately need Nazism to be on the right. It's the only thing that fits their twisted, wrong-headed worldview. It's not. It's the extreme left. Adolf Hitler was a tyrannical dictator that used lies and fear-mongering to become leader of the German Workers' Socialist Party. He had no regard for religion and exercised left-wing authoritarianism. He mimicked then-President Woodrow Wilson's warped anti-American racist eugenicist progressivism, as well as Benito Mussolini's communist European fascism. He wanted state control of everything, even art. The fact that German businesses were in private name, in the names of private individuals was just a front. They were under state control. He promised to limit incomes and viewed the German people as wards of the state. Gays, the mentally ill, and the infirm were killed. Why did he hate Jews? Well, he stated over and over again in his book, Mein Kampf, you have to unite the people behind a common enemy, end quote. In other words, behind negativity. He wanted to instill hate, whether that hate be for Jews, opponents for global warming, the rich, religious people, Republican conservatives, doesn't matter. You see a pattern here? What do socialists, Nazis, communists, college educators, Democratic Party leaders, progressives, CNN, and America's toilet paper media all have in common? Just like ISIS Islamic terrorists, they all frequently and gladly lie. They all believe in obtaining power based on the cultists' mantra of spreading hate and lies. Hitler firmly endorsed lying. He said that a lie repeated often enough becomes truth. There are people that like to deceive and be deceived. It's kind of a sport to them. They actually have a perverse, disturbing respect for people that are good at it. It's something that only can be appreciated through the eyes of amoral, cynical, liberal elites. In this day and age, liberal simply means dolt. Someone that doesn't know and doesn't know that they don't know. Excuse me. Someone whose selfishness prevents them from seeing past the end of their nose. A liberal elite is a dolt with lots of money. Both are absent any moral conviction whatsoever. If they see a 13-year-old girl dancing nude in a men's club, they want to make sure she's making minimum wage. Speaking of liberal lies, how many people actually know what caused the housing market boom and financial crash of 2008 that rocked this country to its core? It was caused by government intervention solely by the Democratic Party leaders. It started in the mid-70s under then Democrat President Jimmy Carter. His administration started the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, which encouraged banks to make reasonable loans to minorities. It was totally unnecessary because banks don't care about color, they care about money, the color green. In the mid-90s, the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, was tampered with and modified by the Clinton administration. They forced Wall Street-owned banks to make irresponsible loans or pay penalties. It was they guaranteed the loans to people with taxpayer money. Republicans, normally the party of deregulation, tried to regulate and get government out, but the Democratic leaders ran and hid behind the Congressional Black Caucus in Washington, D.C., and all Republican efforts to regulate were labeled racist. With non-qualifying loans available, all houses were snapped up, prices skyrocketed, there were no more vacant houses, because there were no more vacant houses, and then everyone defaulted and prices dropped like a rock. Some of the key players were Bill Clinton, Maxine Waters, Barney Frank, Elijah Cummings, Harry Reid, Christopher Dodd, and none other than Barack Obama. If you don't know any of those names, any conservative Republican can tell you that they are some of the worst, most unscrupulous, bad attitude, fraudulent public representatives this nation has ever seen. Democrats all. This is all a matter of public record with congressional audio and video. You won't find any truth about this at the Huffington Post or at Salon Magazine or on any comedy channel. Those are online disinformation websites and outlets that only lie and quote each other's lies. Modern so-called journalists consider themselves agents of social change, which effectively reduces them to the status of print whores for the anti-American left. There's no truth there. They basically work for Hillary and the Democratic Party leaders. Research nowadays can be quite can be quite challenging under the weight of all the hate on the internet. You have to dig with a shovel. And you really need to keep your eye on the ball too, because liberals will do anything to distract you from the truth. There was a man named Joseph McCarthy that went after communist spies that worked within our government. Soon after, America's toilet paper media went to work on him, and he died in disgrace and has been wrongfully shamed, maligned, and demonized ever since. That was 70 years ago, and now we have the benefit of knowing that he was right about all he had accused. Plus, there were communist spies in the media at the time doing all the false reporting. As a side note, Joseph McCarthy is not to be confused with the House committee that went after Hollywood spies. That committee was called HUAC, H-U-A-A-C, the House Un-American Activities Committee. Joseph McCarthy was a senator and had nothing to do with any House committees. The information on communist spies comes from decrypted Soviet codes released in the mid-90s called the Venona Report, the Venona Project. Either way, the successful media bombardment and slander of Joseph McCarthy's name allowed communists to stay in the government and pass information on our weapon systems, which enabled the Soviet Union to develop atomic weapons years in advance, which made nuclear armament such an apocalyptic problem during the Cold War and threatened the potential annihilation of all human existence worldwide. America's toilet paper media played a huge role in the election of Bill Clinton early in the 1990s. Back then, a huge national debate opened up in our country. Does character matter in a political candidate? That was the debate. Every night on American television, we had spin doctors lying on every network. This was back before any legitimate cable networks like Fox News. It was the female vote that elected Bill Clinton in 1992, not men. History may repeat itself. Remember, Bill Clinton was impeached and disbarred, not for being unfaithful to his wife in the Oval Office, not because he lied to the American people, but because he lied under oath. He was impeached for lack of character. One of his senior advisors, Dick Morris, stated publicly that he never spoke of blacks privately, he just pandered to them. Bill Clinton has always rubbed elbows with world stage criminals. He pardoned hundreds of mobsters during and at the end of his presidency. It was quite telling. Now Hillary, the wife of an impeached president, who claims that her husband's problems were due to, quote, a right-wing conspiracy, not lack of character, is running for president. Mrs. Clinton, always entrenched in scandals, lied when she said that the attack on our consulate in Benghazi, Libya, where an American ambassador and several others died. She lied to the American people in an attempt to hide and downplay the attack because of the upcoming re-election of her boss, President Obama. Character does matter. Religion builds character. Character, godliness, virtue, integrity, honor. That's what we need in elected representatives, not social engineers, government committees, and socialistic progressive Party amoral liberal dolts looking for paychecks. What the American people don't know in election 16 is that we're playing Russian roulette. Hillary is a woman who hides behind a curtain, just like the little man in The Wizard of Oz, and she will reveal her progressive anti-American agenda after the election if she wins, God forbid. In regards to the war in Iraq, when Bill Clinton left office in 2000, he told incoming President-elect George W. Bush that we need regime change in Iraq. Iraq was in violation of the 1991 Gulf War ceasefire agreement after we pushed Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Here at home, up until 2001, all military radar on this country were focused outward offshore, not inward toward the interior. After we were hit on 9/11, Saddam Hussein was not only in violation of the Gulf War agreements, but also in violation of all United Nations resolutions. By entering Iraq, we freed millions of Iraqis from his horrific regime, put some teeth in the United Nations, and at the same time widened our footprint as far as the United States military bases in the middle of the Middle East for our national security. It was a good move. Now let me just clip through and discuss some campaign rhetoric and empty promises by the left. This is a little bit mundane, but I will be brief. The Democratic Party leaders constantly speak of making the rich pay their fair share. Well, that's a lie. The rich, what few there are paying way too much. Raising taxes on people and taking their money is called stealing. It's just for that reason that the rich are bailing out of this country at the rate of thousands per year, and they're taking their businesses with them. How will we ever get rich if our government is stealing our money? Let's be clear. Rich people don't steal your money. Democratic Party leaders steal your money. A funny thing happens when you give your money to government bureaucrats. It disappears. And guess what? The Democratic Party leaders get more contributions at election time, have more millionaires in Congress, have wealthier contributors, and get more money from Wall Street than Republicans. And they call the Republican Party the party for the rich. It's a lie. Democrats say that they want to tax corporations, not the middle class. But when you raise taxes on corporations, they raise their prices and the cost of their services. So it's the same as taxing the middle class. If you ever wonder why Democratic Party leaders talk about global warming, the global warming scare all the time? Well, they figured out a way to tax energy, and those taxes too are passed on to consumers in products and services. If you do some honest research into the subject of global warming, you will find that the science is a lie, and the scientists have been bought. Thousands of scientists are coming forward and admitting that it has been a lie from the start. Democrats want to raise wages. They mean minimum wage. They like to throw out birdseed to the masses. This too raises all prices across the board on the middle class, including prices of daycare centers. We will end up paying $6 for a donut or the business closes. They want fairness and equality in the workplace. Well, that's guaranteed under United States law. They want to bring down the price of college. Well, when government subsidizes something, two things happen. The price goes up and the quality goes down. Jimmy Carter federalized the public school system and took them away from state and local control. That's been a disaster. The price of college has only gotten horribly worse under Democrat policies. Democratic Party leaders want government health care. Well, the Affordable Care Act, which is not so affordable, went to the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional. Our government is not allowed to sell us anything. The Supreme Court came back and said it's legal, but we have to call it what it is. It's a tax. That came from the Supreme Court of the United States. So Democrats want to steal from the rich, they're gone. They want to tax corporations, which falls on the middle class. They want to tax energy, which falls on the middle class. They want government-run health care, which is a tax on the middle class. They want to subsidize college, preschool, which makes it more expensive and is already the case in colleges. And they want to raise minimum wage. Well, that will raise the price of childcare significantly, which forces businesses to raise prices on the middle class. In other words, These are all policies that increase inflation. Plus we have sales tax, gasoline tax, property tax, city tax, state tax, and on and on. We're already overtaxed. Taxes are like speed bumps on the highway of life. The higher they are, the slower the traffic moves. Do you know what TEA stands for, the Tea Party? The TEA stands for taxed enough already. The Tea Party tried to stand up to the Democratic Party leaders, but there was a problem. The president was half black, so they labeled him racist. Then Obama's IRS shut them down by threatening organizers with audits. The Democrats tax, which tears everyone down. Democrats have forced the middle class in this country to spend over $40 trillion on the war on poverty. Do you see that money anywhere? Democrats have increased spending on welfare and now are trying to buy the female vote by forcing insurance companies to provide free contraception. Meanwhile, our taxes and insurance premiums go through the roof trying to pay for it all. Republicans know that happy people are what fixes the economy, not government bureaucrats imposing taxes on the middle class. Republicans encourage commerce with lower taxes and support and encourage family values, which builds everyone up, including you. You keep the money you earn. Class envy, class hatred, and government handouts are just rotten left-wing tactics and negative emotions that instill lies and irrational hatred. While we all fight with each other, they raise our taxes, break down families, and work to overthrow our country where we, the people, are supposed to be in charge. The theory that wealthy people have robbed you or are holding you back or affecting you in any way is a canard, a myth, a lie that dies on contact with the light of truth. The truth is that the Democratic Party leaders are robbing you blind and then trying to blame it on rich people. People of wealth are usually great examples of wisdom and generational success. They widen the tax base by creating jobs and are truly a national treasure. The Democrats don't want you to make money and become independent. They want you in menial, go-nowhere jobs. They want the entire village out working and distracted from politics. This is not far from the cotton fields and tobacco farms of old. They're going to fight for you. They want you treated right on the plantation. You're going to have a child, just get rid of it over there and get back to work. There's no emphasis on family, just abortion, child care, preschool, temporary family leave. Hillary's village eats kids. How about a village where taxes are lower and one spouse can stay home all day? Isn't that where you wanted your parents, at home? How about an adult in every house during the day, maintaining the home, managing affairs? Kids can play outside again and supervised and have fun. Fun, sports, games are important. They prepare kids for life, keep them busy and away from drugs, sex, and crime. They even encourage social behavior on par with adults. So what will happen if America's dolts vote to take God out of the equation and put our kids' futures in the hands of social engineers and the progressives' utopia of unelected boards of professional administrators? Well, progressive engineers traditionally have felt that we need to curtail the poor and Progressive engineers traditionally have felt that we need to curtail the poor and unsophisticated from having children. In fact, to them, it's a matter of national security. Rich, intelligent people are too busy and dedicated to plan and raise large families, and the poor, mindless people breed like wildfire. Remember that progressives are godless. Progressives want to strengthen or save the American gene pool from inferior persons and races, something that inspired a world leader named Adolf Hitler. In the 1920s and 30s, progressives started forced sterilization programs where women were sterilized by the government. This was usually done to prisoners, illegal aliens, mental patients, or welfare mothers who were threatened with more jail time, confinement, or losing their benefits unless and until they signed legal papers and agreed to sterilization. They were coerced. This happened by the tens of thousands right here in the United States. A famous case was a teenage girl named Carrie Buck, who sued the government to avoid sterilization. The godless, unelected Supreme Court, however, decided to proceed and sterilize her for being feeble-minded. After the procedure, her and her one previous daughter would go on to become highly educated, productive people. Here's the thing. Adolf Hitler, a socialist from fascist Germany, President Wilson, an American progressive, Joseph Stalin, a communist from Russia, Benito Mussolini, a communist from fascist Italy, the British Fabian Society, communists that believe in the slow overthrow of all governments in the world and favor global communitarianism, and Margaret Sanger, a progressive eugenicist and founder of Planned Parenthood who believed in the elimination of all inferior people, all studied each other during the 1920s and 30s. What they all agreed upon through sheer godlessness was that the world would be taken over by the weak and unfit and inferior unless they appointed themselves as God, which is what stupid, regressive, pompous, godless, liberal monsters do. In 1973, the progressive, liberal, secular, unelected Supreme Court once again abused its power and injected its own agenda by unconstitutionally circumventing the American system of voter participation and our legislative branch of government, and dictated that a woman has a legal right to an abortion in a country where rights come from God. What would Abe Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. think about the moral character of the Union with that ruling? Up until that time, the United States was one country, one oasis in the world that stood for morality and godliness. That was more than 40 years ago. And since then, half the states have passed godless liberal legislation to protect a woman's ability to have a legal abortion, even if Roe v. Wade is overturned. And yet Democrats still pretend that they're fighting for you on abortion. It's embarrassing. No one in the history of the United States has ever been arrested for having an abortion. It was originally illegal primarily because it was a dangerous procedure. That changed completely in the mid-1960s, and back then the National Organization of Women said, quote, "Millions of women are dying due to back alley illegal abortions," end quote. Years later they confessed they just made that up. It was a complete lie. Democrats are Lord and Savior to liberal women on the abortion issue. As we all know, driving a car is a privilege that can be revoked by the state. But imagine for a second if the Republican Party stepped in and said, we want to make driving a car a right, so no one can ever have their driving privileges revoked. We're going to stop that. Don't let Democrats deny you your right to drive. This would put a lot of horrible, incapable drivers out on the road, but it would be politically expedient. Is that how we win elections? It's wrong to launch a campaign of hate. That's godless. So let's take a look at the wonderful liberal progressive Democrat dream called Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is abortion clinics. Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger, I guess we're still on this subject, aren't we? Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger wanted to get birth control to young poor mothers. So she opened birth control clinics in poor minority areas. Isn't that beautiful? Doesn't that just get you right there? The problem is that Margaret Sanger believed in the progressive pseudoscience of negative eugenics. Remember that progressivism means leaving God behind as an old failed philosophy. As a bigoted elitist loaded with snobbery, Margaret Sanger and her British communist friends in the Fabian Society could do much better at human management than any moral code of God. They saw a country of religious knaves overrun by a thing called freedom. So she testified before the United States Senate that the country needs a rigid policy of sterilization of the weak and unfit, forced segregation so the various classes wouldn't intermingle, limited immigration from parts of the world where some are less human than others, and to apply negative eugenics to achieve a superior and more intelligent race. Positive eugenics is the selective breeding of the superior races and classes of people. Negative eugenics means eliminating or curtailing the breeding of inferior races and classes of people. A leader of the progressive movement, Margaret Sanger hated motherhood, chastity, inferior classes of people, welfare, religion, and all sub-races of human beings. Hillary Clinton has received the prestigious Margaret Sanger Award and said that her life and leadership was, quote, one of the most transformational in the entire history of the human race, end quote. Of course, not for the better if one happens to be one of the undesirables that Margaret Sanger would exclude or exterminate. All of Margaret Sanger's birth control clinics were in poor, mostly black, high minority areas, as are all her Planned Parenthood clinics today. They just changed the name. Planned Parenthood serves approximately 0.08% of the population and is completely absent in 89% of American counties. Planned Parenthood is supported by the Democratic Party leaders, the NAACP, the National Urban League, and the Congressional Black Caucus. This is not coincidence or irony. There's money changing hands. That's corruption. So let me ask, is there racism in America? Black babies are being aborted at Planned Parenthood by at least 4-to-1 to white babies, in spite of the fact that they are only 13% of the population. This is nothing short of genocide against people of color. Your tax dollars fund Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood contributes heavily to the Democratic Party leaders. Don't confuse Planned Parenthood with crisis pregnancy centers. Crisis pregnancy centers help people. There are crisis pregnancy centers and abortion clinics all around the country in all the areas that Planned Parenthood omits. Planned Parenthood clinics focus on abortion, not women's services. That's how they make their money, abortion. Planned Parenthood's little game is if a woman comes in for an abortion and she's given a cup of water and a lollipop and uses the restroom, they report that only a quarter of the services provided went to abortion. Their policies of don't ask and don't inform can send a young female back to being raped, can send young females that are being raped right back to their abusers. Planned Parenthood does gender abortions. If you don't want a boy, they'll take care of it. We've had 50 million abortions in this country, proudly conducted under the careful stewardship of the Democratic Party leaders. Of the ones performed by Planned Parenthood, only 0.05% are sent out as adoptions. Planned Parenthood does not give away free contraception and has not reduced pregnancies anywhere. Contraceptives don't work even when they're used. What Planned Parenthood does is promote a godless value system that creates unwanted pregnancy, disease, more business, and more devoted, lost, weak, and dependent Democrats. Almost 10 out of 10 pregnant females that walk into a Planned Parenthood clinic obtain abortions. Planned Parenthood is a one-way abortion factory. Does that sound like choice to you? There's a t-shirt that says, 3 out of 3 women will be repeatedly lied to by an abortionist in their lifetime. In true Democratic Party leader style, Planned Parenthood lies about everything. How does an abortion clinic that offers no prenatal or neonatal services and has no pregnancy doctors on staff call themselves reproductive health care? Mother Teresa said, for every abortion, there are 2 victims. We used to tell our kids not to touch a hot stove. Now we have Planned Parenthood via government liberal progressives telling our kids it's none of your parents' damn business if you want to climb on a hot stove. Here's a few hot pads. When you get burned, come see us. And for $600 or $800, we'll mend your wounds. By the way, if anything ever gets in your way, like a fetus, kill it and go about your day. They're not going to tell our kids about the all expenses paid adoption plans that include living expenses, legal expenses, hospital expenses, relocating expenses if necessary, and all the scholarships available to adoptive mothers. They're selling immediate gratification and happiness and laughing all the way to the bank. These kids are under the painfully mistaken notion that evil religious people will only judge you for climbing on a hot stove or killing anything that gets in your way. You don't need your parents or God or any man or marriage. All you need is Planned Parenthood, the Democratic Party, and a smartphone for selfies. Just to be clear, Immoral and judgmental people stand in judgment of religious people. To be religious means to not be judgmental, but instead to slowly learn how to use, exercise, and teach good judgment, which is entirely different. Judgmental people condemn. Religious people want to help and pray for all. Prayer is basically the hope that we can all do better. We're supposed to be smarter than the animals. Perhaps we should outlaw unwanted pregnancy and unwed mothers. All unwanted pregnancies have to be reported. The male gets slapped with an $800 stud fine. It should be more than littering, right? The mother gets a free ticket to an abortion hospital as long as she agrees to do 100 hours community service and attend counseling at the religious institution of her choice. The whole safe sex thing that liberals have been pushing for the last 50 years is not going too well. So this is one nation under God. What does God think? Well, God does not want any unborn babies to die. God does not want any unwanted pregnancies. We need discipline, love, moral values, and to strengthen American families. People need to be home for that, not out working for the Democratic Party leaders. With God removed from public schools, the liberal communist-founded ACLU threatening municipalities over religious signs and symbols, and the horrible anti-American social media online, and the perverse, treasonous anti-American press, this is a period of great confusion for our people. Our unsuspecting populace of hard-working Americans trying to keep their head above water have neither the time nor the interest to keep their eye on politics. With only one eye open, they have been misleadingly convinced that we are, quote, free from religion. Religion, which is the fabric of our country, nowadays finds itself on the outside, banging on the windows, let me in, which naturally makes people feel like they need to lock the door. We even have emboldened smarmy little liberal dolts on the internet insisting that religious Americans, quote, find a new place to live. Where there is a lack of godliness, there is a vacuum created. When people have been routed away from God, where do they go? They get lost. They commit to self. Amongst self-obsessed people with a disdain for religion, Christians are viewed as freaks that think they're perfect. The reality is that Christians are sinners that acknowledge that they need God and know that salvation is not achieved, but received. Godlessness makes people seek comfort in other places, like collective group sameness, where weak-minded people band together in the latest trends, fads, fashions, wearing sandals, short shorts, tattoos, piercings. The insecure, ignorant, and self-obsessed unknowingly walk around as political billboards for the godless liberal left, and will support any political candidate that smiles, acts cute and folksy, and mixes their message of hate and lies with stories of sunshine and warm puppies. Tattoos and piercings are satanic rituals, proudly displayed and proffered as adornments, proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that a large bulk of our populace's heads have been suspended in the great white fog of the unknown, at least politically and spiritually. Knowledgeless, indoctrinated human souls, pre-wired and programmed to be hateful and express a dominant yet unconscious intolerance for what is perceived as the moral minority. Drowning in the wussification of political correctness, they are aghast when they come across religious signs, symbols, or dogma deemed by the left as taboo or imposing. Where are the police when you need them? There's a t-shirt out there that says, I'm one of those evil Christians that Satan warned you about. There is a silent war going on. Not too many people can even see it. Godlessness or self-righteousness is greatly reflected in the way people drive. People tailgate and tailgate tailgaters. They look like they're playing train as they drive along the highway at high speeds. Tailgating is illegal, stupid, stressful, and dangerous. When you're tailgating, if you need to change lanes, you have to turn your head to check your blind spot. If the person in front of you taps their brake, you're gone, you're done. Quite often, there are so many bad drivers in one spot that traffic has to slow down. This is not what God wants. God loves you. He doesn't want you to harass people and endanger your life and the life of everyone around you. I'm not asking you to have a personal relationship with God or accept Jesus Christ into your heart as your Lord and Savior who died for your sins. I'm not asking for that. That would be smart. But what I'm asking you to accept is that we are one nation under God. In God we trust. God's love is key to our freedom and security. This is where you live. When you put your faith in man, whether personally or politically, you are going to be horribly disappointed. And in the case of voting for a presidential leader of our nation, if you don't vote for traditional American godly values, you not only jeopardize your own freedom, but quite possibly world peace as well. In Romans 12:10, the Bible says, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love and give preference to one another in honor." Moving towards biblical principles and caring more about others and more about ourselves saves us and moves traffic along fast, smooth, and safe. Rejecting biblical principles and turning to man's rules instead of God's laws, which are rooted in eternal truths, holds us back and destroys us. Voting against religious values and principles in the United States of America is the same as throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Organized religion has been the greatest civilizing force in human history. Wars are fought over power, greed, territory, hate, revenge, everything antithetical to religion. Religion accounts for less than 6% of the world's wars, less than 4% if you take out Muslim conflicts. Most of the 360 million people in the world needlessly killed have been due to tyrannical governments turning their guns on their own defenseless people. God is love, and love is God. Americans have become Christophobic victims duped by the power-hungry Democratic power leaders. We are standing at the precipice of slavery when people are willing to relegate and limit themselves to sameness and beg for rights and handouts from Democrats. In the United States, you are guaranteed by God and our Declaration of Independence the right to pursue happiness, dreams, acquire wealth, live free, and have equal opportunity. When the Democratic Party leaders invite you to vote for them, they have something else in mind. Their one major obstacle is religion. They want you to trade your God-given freedom for sameness, for slavery, for misery. They want you to flush this, to destroy this country by rejecting God and foolishly put them in charge. The godless Democratic Party leaders are intentionally disrupting our peace and making our lives miserable by instituting policies that foster dependency, by condemning and chasing away people of wealth, by taxing us and regulating us to death, by attempting to break down religion and destroy morality, and by instilling hate, which causes chaos and anarchy. Again, it's intentional. If every American had a wonderful life, property, wealth, family, a chicken in every pot, a large warm fire in every fireplace, what would be the chances of us voting to displace our godly nation with a bunch of people looking for power? Not likely. So they fly in hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees that hail from a country that openly commits genocide against Christians. That should cause enough problems for Americans. They want fire in the streets. The worse your life is, the more they can convince you to lose your faith in God, hate Republicans, and elect them so they can, quote, fight for you. We're not united under God. We're not even united under our flag. The truth is the Democratic Party leaders have successfully divided this country and are on the verge of conquering it. For generations, they've been pumping left-wing, hate-filled propaganda into our cities at every election and denying our children any legitimate education about the very country in which we live. This is routine procedure in socialist countries. Our large, expansive government will lie like crazy to keep their jobs. It's a problem. Taken as a whole, this country is weaker than ever before. Our strength is measured by our moral fortitude. We have already foolishly elected many government officials that lack any moral character whatsoever. As a result, we've been saddled with the unconstitutional and felonious separation of church and state forced upon us by unconstitutional abuse of power by the Supreme Court. These are serious blows to our country. Our system of checks and balances has been compromised by the concerted efforts of one party. This is tyranny. This is our government out of control, abusing its power and operating without the consent of the governed. This is precisely why our government had the wisdom to create the Second Amendment, which is the right to keep and bear arms, to form a well-armed militia. We are the militia. It's us. The Constitution says the right to bear arms, quote, shall not be infringed. Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? But an armed citizenry creates a problem for the Democratic Party leaders. By the way, did you ever notice that after a mass shooting, in their feigned attempts to curtail gun violence, and they never mentioned the lunacy of gun-free zones, where people are sitting ducks. Posting in an area a gun-free zone is like putting a sign in your yard that says, no squirrels. What can the Democratic Party leaders do to get guns away from intelligent people that still have brains and that haven't been whipped into an anti-religious hateful froth? Well, they can't. But here's what they can do. They can stop manufacturers from making and selling guns, and they can make ammo unavailable. Can we say that the Democratic Party leaders hate for the NRA and their constant drumbeat of absurd gun control laws is proof that they have ill intent? Ultimately, our guns are the only things that keep us safe. Americans are armed citizens. Let me ask, do you think there are people that want this land? There has been speculation that if we abandon God and this country is dissolved, the North will go to Canada, the East will go to Great Britain, the South to Mexico, and the West to China. How about atheist Russia? Are they willing to fight for a piece of the pie? What about Italy, Germany, Japan? Do you know how bad they would all like to spread out? What about radical Islam? What happens to the rest of the world if we lose the United States? What happens to world peace? Would there be God's freedom anywhere in the world? United we stand, divided we fall. We need to get back to our framers' original intent, which is freedom through virtue and respect for religion. According to one of our founders, John Adams, our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. Our Pledge of Allegiance says one nation under God for a reason. Much is at stake. Right now, the United States is seen globally as a house with a for sale sign in the lawn. If our freedoms are ultimately lost and the United States quickly declines into a secular regressive nation or is completely divided up, where will Christians go? Well, the answer is we are already home. We are at peace no matter where we are. Christians don't need the United States. The United States needs virtuous leaders that understand and respect the fact that this is based on Christianity, that it is God's love that grants freedom for all regardless, and it is ultimately the Christian God that guards and protects those rights. What do Jesus Christ, millions of brave Americans, and most of our founding fathers all have in common? They all died for you, for your freedom, for the freedom of mankind. Many of them were tortured. Many of their families were tortured and killed. Many lost everything they had. Many were beheaded. Christ also gave his life for your salvation. You have a hang up about Christianity? Does that sound theocratic? Our founders avoided using the word Christianity because that's not what it's about per se. It's about the generic God, about goodness, virtue, not any one religion. Make no mistake about it, however, Christianity is unique among all other religions. The role of Christianity in the United States and in American life in general is much greater than most people know. From our calendar to our entire legal system, to the family unit, to education, our language, and all of science, music, and art. The Republican Party platform speaks of America, our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers, their guiding principles, our religious heritage. The Democratic Party platform speaks of blame, excuses, is loaded with propaganda, supports weakness, usurps, pushes God aside, is divisive, pits one group against another, attacks certain groups, rich against poor, fosters ill will throughout. They only patronize religion. Clearly, freedom under God is not their agenda. Their platform is a national disgrace. There is American exceptionalism. We have the best constitution in the world. France has had many, many forms of government in its rough history. Our Constitution is the oldest, most revered, and referenced document on earth. What happened during the formation of this country is nothing short of a miracle. Never has there been freedom and independence like this before in human history. All men are created equal, though it is alluded to in 1 Corinthians 12:13 and in Galatians 3:28. All men are created equal is again the essence of the Holy Bible. In 2 Corinthians 3:17, the Bible says, quote, "Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty." Take a look at America with no liberals. God, religious values, truth, and morality are back in schools. There's no political correctness or worry of microaggressions. You can say God bless you when someone sneezes, Merry Christmas, sing Christmas carols. We have happier children, lower taxes, families flourish. More responsible young adults that know morality, church attendance rises, productivity increases, inflation drops, no more trade deals with other countries that only benefit the Democratic Party leaders so jobs come back to America. People once again pursue happiness and realize the American dream. The economy zooms, which fixes Social Security, Medicare, and the national debt. America maintains its role as world superpower, and the United States of America retains its status as the ultimate inclusive, civilized utopia around the world with freedom, equality, and justice for all. We can all sit around and sing, "Thanks God, the damn Democrats are gone." Our country was founded on the principle and the pursuit of moral virtue, as understood by the light of objective truth. The American tradition of free government pivots on the conviction that only a virtuous people can be free. Virtuous people are described as inwardly governed by the recognized principles of universal moral law. Morality is like road signs. Road closed, bridge out, lane ends, do not pass. Ignore those signs at your own peril. One of the worst liberal lies of this century is safe sex. Sexual disease and infections are rampant in today's culture. There is no kind of casual sexual contact that is safe. Infections of the mouth and throat are spreading like wildfire, and they can turn into a mild form of cancer. Anyone can unknowingly be a carrier. Safe sex means waiting till you're in a committed marriage with someone else that has been waiting until they're in a committed marriage. If you decide to live with or cohabitate with or play house and pretend you're married with your boyfriend or girlfriend, it reduces the chance of marriage exponentially, as well as any chances of staying in the relationship. You end up shortchanging your future physically, emotionally, and financially. If you engage in casual sex while presenting the obvious problems of laying down with persons of low morals, rape, pregnancy, and disease, it also greatly reduces your chances for a long-term relationship. Using people you think are cute or attractive to explore or enhance masturbative fantasies is incredibly abusive. And don't kid yourself. 0 plus 0 equals 0. You will not blossom as a human being unless or until you have learned to focus away from your crotch. God and everyone that loves you wants you to start your life off the best, safest, happiest way possible. Love, which is the objective of all of humankind, is not about filling emptiness. It's about sharing fullness. If you engage in a homosexual relationship, whether you're married to them or not, loyalty and longevity are extremely low. Incidents of violence are extremely high, and your chances of contracting an infectious disease are off the charts. The medical field tells us that human anuses are designed to expel excrement. It's a one-way dirt chute. Forcing anything the opposite direction causes rather severe medical problems for the recipient. Walls of female genitalia are thick, multiple-celled, two-way. Anal walls are thin, fragile, single-celled, one-way. Gays live shorter lives than heterosexuals by an average of about 20 years. The Supreme Court of the United States, abusing its power and legalizing gay marriage, has done two things. It's created conflict because it is secular, liberal, authoritarian policy forced on the American people. Remember, it wasn't voted on and it did not go through Congress. And it shoots gays in the foot because gays that are not legally married are losing their special legal rights and privileges that were granted to domestic partnerships and legal unions. So you're either married or you're nobody, just like heteros. Most gays, by the way, are not the slightest bit interested in getting married. What gay rights activists and liberal political activists have accomplished is creating misguided hate for religious people and ignorant disrespect for our system of representative democracy, which up until now has protected us from such nonsense. All major religions of the world counsel young people away from these self-destructive behaviors and life pitfalls towards more beneficial practices. You don't behave any particular way to please religious zealots. You do it to improve your chances of survival, of achieving a happy, joyous life, of developing healthy, positive relationships. Scientific studies, like the ones revealed in Dr. Richard Huseman's book, Prescription Positive, have determined that the secret to health and longevity is not what you eat, or drink, or smoke, or whether or not you work out. It's the number of quality, healthy relationships in your life. Not relationships based on weakness, self-destruction, hate, dependency, or sex, but quality, positive, fun, caring, constructive, productive, safe, long-term, joy-filled, loving relationships. Again, we're supposed to be smarter than the animals. That's why we shake hands with people instead of smelling each other's butts. To grow, to prepare yourself to make life's critical decisions, to become virtuous, to know anything about love for another human being, you need God, not sex. God loves sex. God invented sex. Sex is supposed to be a sacred gift shared between people in the context of love, sacrifice, and lifelong devotion in holy matrimony. In fact, the best marriage is going to be the one with God's love wrapped around the two in the middle. All of the above examples of bad decisions are of people displacing God with their own moral objectives for matters of convenience. Which is a microcosm of what's happening nationally. Both God and the United States grant you the freedom to be immoral and ignorant as long as you stay within the law. Understand, however, that destructive behavior, whether toward yourself or directed towards someone else, is an abuse of that freedom and not consistent with the pursuit of happiness. The Democratic Party will support you in any and all of the above in order to secure your vote. That doesn't make it right, and that doesn't help you. A vote for Democrat right now in the United States is a vote to destroy this country. It's almost as if the left has a new secret weapon that wins elections, the glaring and conspicuous B4, the beastly bastion of bobbling buttheads, euphemistically called low information voters. Why in God's name, I can't tell you how maddening it is that anyone in the United States would even entertain the notion of voting for an alternative form of government like Bernie Sanders' socialism or Hillary Clinton's progressivism. We are a nation in mourning over our bobbling buttheads. We need to cast our votes for God, for moral values, for people of godliness and religious virtue whose values are consistent with natural laws and the facts of reality. God is the answer, not the problem. God is always the answer to any problem. Love is the answer, and God is love. John Lennon, a drug-addicted liberal dolt, got it dead wrong right after he got it dead right. He's saying, all we need is love. How true. Religion is people trying to learn about love. God's love is what combats evil injustices in the world. Look at the success of the socialists, anti-religious secularists, and ISIS terrorists on the internet. Indoctrinating ignoramuses with hate and lies under the guise of truth and enlightenment is a booming industry. Hate is fast and easy and spreads quickly. God's love, truth, justice is healing and eternal, but takes time. The good news is the small armies of love will march longer and further than the massive armies of hate. Love is worth dying for. Hate is not. Hate is an evil injustice. Somewhere in America right now, there is a young person thinking of killing themselves. When you're confronted with a situation like that, the first thing you say to that person is, stop getting your news from the Huffington Post. These types of websites are staffed and run by socialists making the case to go communist. This is not a place for healthy minds or any sanity. Our kids, when I say kids, I like to say that we have the smartest kids in the world. The problem is they're all seniors. Our nation's kids are victims of political claptrap and liberal anti-American hate speech. An innocent child says to his grandmother, "Grandma, why did that tree fall in the forest?" And Grandma says, "Well, because profit-obsessed capitalists have not allowed any old-growth trees to remain on the continent, and when even evil European settlers came to America, They committed genocide against all of our Native American Indians, and they never learned to love, respect the land, or preserve the planet. That child's precious life was just extinguished by that grandmother. There is no peace in hate and lies. The vast majority of Native American Indians in the East were wiped out by the disease long before the first European settlers arrived. The thing to do to help distressed people of high anxiety is to remove as much pollution and infected thinking as possible, in hope that God's love and the creation of the universe and the miracle of life will reveal itself, so that they may find some joy, clarity, and start to adopt an attitude of appreciation, respect, gratitude, and gratitude. Of course, never hesitate for 1 second to call a suicide hotline. But God is missing. Where is God in America? He's not at the movies, he's not in magazines, not at the mall, nowhere on TV shows, not at school. You have to leave America to enter a college campus. How about the 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas? Those holidays are all about God. There is no God in America anywhere. Well, let me give you a personal perspective on where God is. When we are born, we are given a sheet of glass to look through. Sitting on the other side of that sheet of glass is God. He's always there just watching us. As we grow and develop, we learn to sin. And sinning is like throwing dirt on our glass. It makes it dirty. God always keeps his side of the glass perfectly clean. But as our glass becomes more obscure, we lose sight of God. And the more we lose sight of God, the more we sin. It makes our glass dirty. The thing about the glass story is that there really is a sheet of glass. The sheet of glass is your eyeballs. And every time you blink, which is an involuntary reflex, that's God cleaning his side of the glass. Finding God is like finding deer, a baby bird, a bear, or a rabbit. You have to make some changes and make an honest, sincere pursuit. If you can clear a little spot in your glass, you'll find that God's been there the whole time, never judging, just hoping to see you again, just hoping you will remember him. And when you do, you will feel his love, and you can begin to work on cleaning your glass. You can make your glass crystal clear, just like the day you were born. Then you will know not just how to get your glass dirty, but how to work to get it clean. God knew that it would be difficult for man to cope with his inherent sinful nature. So he had his only son die for you and pay for your sins. So your sins are already forgiven through faith in him. How do you spell relief? R-E-P-E-N-T. God is on the internet. One place you can find him is at northlandchurch.org. Click on Connect, then find Joel Hunter. You will hear positive, uplifting music, and then Pastor Hunter will speak of God. I think they have him locked there in the church. I think they have him there locked in a cage or something. Also, God is at zradio.com. Click on Listen Now. And don't forget, God has a country. It's called the United States of America. Atheists, agnostics, and such are people running and scrambling as fast and as hard as they can, trying to stay on the dark side of the earth for fear of sunburn or sun glare. They need to relax and let the light fall on them. People of faith that know God are lifted off the ground with grace, are overflowing with gratitude, and see miracles everywhere. All of mankind are like fish swimming in the ocean of God's love and arguing about whether or not we're wet. If you go to godevidence.com, you will find many major scientists of the world that agree that science and religion are both the study of God. In an interview with the Saturday Evening Post, Albert Einstein, a Jew, was asked, quote, "Do you accept the historical Jesus?" And he responded, quote, "Unquestionably. No one can read the Gospels without feeling the actual presence of Jesus. His personality pulsates in every word. No myth is filled with such life," end quote. God reveals himself in many ways. The Bible, which is his word. Nature, which is his works. And of course, he lives deep in the heart of every human, if we choose to love one another. Now I'd like to close with a few quotes from some of our founding fathers. There are many, but here are just 6. John Adams said, The Christian religion is, above all other religions that has ever prevailed or existed in both ancient or modern times, the religion of wisdom, virtue, equity, and humanity. Patrick Henry wrote, "The great pillars of all government and of social life are virtue, morality, and religion. This is the armor, my friend, and this alone that renders us invincible." Benjamin Franklin wrote, "As to Jesus of Nazareth, I think the system of morals and his religion as he left them to us is the best the world has ever saw or is likely to see." Thomas Jefferson wrote, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure." George Washington said, "While we are zealously performing the duties of good citizens and soldiers, we certainly ought not to be inattentive to the higher duties of religion. To the distinguished character of patriot, it should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian." And again, Ben Franklin, "This will be the best security for maintaining our liberties. A nation of well-informed men who have been taught to know and prize the rights which God has given them cannot be enslaved. It is in the religion of ignorance that tyranny begins." Now, I'd like to leave it right there on that sweet note, but there is one more thing: voter fraud. Obama won the Democratic nomination by massive voter fraud. Attempts to investigate the fraud were blocked repeatedly by Democrats already in power. The investigators, trump up charges against them, then fine them for the cost of their investigative work, claiming that they were just wasting taxpayer money. And again, anyone who tries to fix the problem of voter fraud with voter IDs is labeled racist. This is an abuse of power by the Democratic Party leaders, and it's happening on an even broader scale. This is what's happening right now in our country. This is an emergency. We need to flatly vote out all Democrats. Good people need to stick together. When good people are not together, that's something that needs to be looked at and studied. Maybe it's because of mental illness. Maybe it's because of bad advice. Maybe it's because of a political entity that's fractionalizing people. Nothing is more heartbreaking than seeing good people divided. And I will leave you with the words from Dinesh D'Souza. "You are not an American until you are a Republican."